In this video, we will establish what the Noahide Code is, why nobody knows about it, why the laws are necessary, and more. I aim to make this video a general overview of God's universal laws for everybody, the Noahide Code. So what exactly does God want us to do? If you watched my last video, you know that our purpose as a whole is to bring godliness into the world. Gentiles can do this by following the Noahide Code. When I refer to Gentiles, I mean non-Jews. First, what is the Noahide Code? Since the first man, Adam, the Noahide Code are universal laws intended to allow all of humanity to connect with God and follow his path. God gave Adam 6 of the commandments, which are the prohibitions against idolatry, against blasphemy, against murder, against theft, against immoral relations, and the obligation for justice, which today would be about establishing course of justice. Then, after the flood, God repeated these to Noah and added one more, the prohibition against eating a limb from a living animal. These laws were then iterated at Mount Sinai in front of the entire Jewish nation. Thus, we don't just follow them because Adam or Noah followed them. We follow them because they were given to Moses at Mount Sinai in front of the entire Jewish nation. Mass revelation is the cornerstone for God's true eternal message. I encourage you to watch this video for more on that. Now, it's important to note that at Mount Sinai, most of the laws were intended for the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the Jewish nation. The Jews' role in this world is to be a holy nation, a kingdom of priests, a light to the world. They play a crucial part in God's divine plan. But God is also largely relying on Gentiles, which comprise about 99.8% of the world's population, for the future world to come. It's also important to note that these 7 commandments are not the code's entirety. Rather, they're more like categories that have subcategories. For example, the prohibition against murder also includes prohibitions against injury. The prohibition against theft also includes prohibitions against kidnapping. Many others also that are intuitive to the upright human mind branch out from these, like giving charity and performing acts of kindness. In future videos, I'll explain how all of these are derived and the varying degrees of importance and severity of each. So I know you may be wondering, why have I never heard of these? Let me explain. They have existed since Adam, and we know this because God punishes for actions committed in Genesis before the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, which is in Exodus. Remember that Adam stole from the forbidden tree and was cast out from the garden. Cain killed his brother Abel and incurred similar punishment. God punished Sodom and Gomorrah, and he also flooded the world. Because God would not act unjustly, we know that the world must have known about the laws that they were breaking, even if they neglected it. Another example of why we know that they must have existed before Mount Sinai is that the word righteousness is used many times before the Sinai event. What denotes righteousness? How was Job righteous, for example? There must have been a standard. And even still, we can arrive at many of these laws just through reason alone. Okay, so we know that the laws existed since the first human, but why does nobody know about them today? Well, the Jews have actually known about them forever. I mean, they've kept them tightly recorded and transmitted orally using Genesis 2:16 as an aid. And we know that Noahides have existed. Josephus, a great Jewish historian, wrote in the 1st century about God-fearers, non-Jews who accepted upon themselves the yoke of heaven and the Noahide Code. Rabbi Akiva in the 2nd century coined the term Noahide Code, since we are all descendants of Noah, and thus we should follow him. Nevertheless, the main reason why people today don't know about them is because for centuries, Jews have been exiled in distant, foreign, oppressive lands, forced into ghettos, prohibited to converse with their Gentile neighbors. Thus, a suitable arena for teaching about the Noahide Code remained in the future, namely the last 80 years since Israel became a state. Over time, the Noahide Code has steadily gained recognition. In fact, thanks to the efforts of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the United States has officially recognized Education and Sharing Day every year since 1978, promoting universal moral values that are rooted in the Noahide Code. Now, you may also be wondering, why do we need laws? Can't I just be a good guy? Can't I just be nice? Can't I just love everybody? Isn't ethics enough? The Torah actually contains both ethics and laws. But the problem with just ethics is that ethics are subjective. What is nice for somebody may not be nice for another. What may be good for somebody may not be good for another. For some reason, whenever this topic comes up, I always think, if Hitler spared a Jew from going to the concentration camp, he probably thought that he was doing a good deed. He was being nice. But we would think of this as just being a commonly decent human. Law objectifies morality. This is why we need law. Without a universal law, we see differences in cultural morality, historical shifts in morality, and personal bias in ethics. For example, in some cultures, generosity means sharing with the entire community. In others, generosity just means providing for one's own family. Both are seen as morally right in their respective societies. However, in the society where you don't share with the community and just your own family, you're probably looked at as being selfish. We also see examples of historical shifts. Centuries ago, honor duels were a noble way to resolve disputes. Today, they would be seen as reckless violence. And one more, a thief might see himself as a modern-day Robin Hood, redistributing wealth, whereas the victim sees the thief as a criminal. Without a higher standard, morality becomes a matter of subjective opinion rather than universal truth. Thankfully, we know what God wants for us because of the Mount Sinai event. If you don't believe it, I encourage you to watch this video. But know that ethics are guiding moral principles having broad applications. They are values commonly held, but whose interpretation becomes subjective. Laws, however, are specifically defined guidelines that mold and shape society. Laws have the effect of putting everybody on the same page. They create commonality and community. However, we know that laws without ethics are meaningless. However, ethics need laws to impose structure and commonality and to preserve their meaning. One final point to note, these laws are rooted in God's love for us. Laws without love become dictatorial tyranny, but love without laws becomes chaos. For example, a parent who enforces rules without love becomes authoritarian, creating fear rather than respect. But a parent who only gives love without structure, like no discipline, no rules, raises a child who lacks direction and struggles with self-control. The best parenting balances love and structure, guiding the child with clear rules while still expressing love and support. Thus, love tempered by law and law tempered by love is God's ideal formulation. By fulfilling the commandments and bringing godliness into the world, we connect with our Creator and become part of His will. In this sense, the 7 commandments are far more than just laws. They are a way for us to connect with God. Therefore, the Noahide Code must be studied, loved, pursued, and performed with tremendous joy and thankfulness for the opportunities that they present. The fulfillment of the code contributes to the rectification of God's creation. By fulfilling it, we draw God's light into the world and perfect it. Remember, the 7 commandments, the 7 broad categories are prohibitions against idolatry, blasphemy, theft, murder, immoral relations, eating the limb from a living animal, and the obligation to establish course of justice. We will start to go further into these laws, see where they're derived, see what they mean. I encourage you to come with me on this journey. Subscribe to stay tuned. Thank you, as always, for watching.